By the end of this video, you'll have the exact frameworks that my sales teams use to overcome the spouse obstacle. These sales teams did a total of $47 million in cash in 2024, and I'm going to walk you through the exact 3 things that we do to prevent the spouse obstacle from coming up, what to do if it comes up, and then how to handle it afterwards. And as a total bonus, by sticking to the end of this video, I'll also show you our Hail Mary strategy that we use that works most of the time. Step number 1, have them show up for the damn call. Now, I like to think about it this way. I'd much rather have an ounce of prevention than a pound of reaction. And so if I can get the spouse to show up for the call, that mitigates the likelihood that the spouse objection occurs. Sounds obvious, right? But do we do it? Not all of the time. And the reason why we don't do it is because we don't know how to do it. But once we know how to do it, it increases the chances that we do it. So here's the strategies that my team uses. Number 1, first thing to avoid calling it a decision-making call. Anytime that somebody says, oh yes, well, is your partner involved in the decision-making process? Well, just in terms of like how relationships work, one thing that partners generally avoid doing is making decisions together. Whether it's they can't agree on the size of the couch, the color of the couch, what colors the floor should be, the name of the children, how to trade. Decisions that require couples to think through together, they will generally associate to be a negative or at least burdensome. And so if we want somebody to show up and bring their spouse, we don't want to frame it as a decision-making call because couples will generally avoid decision-making calls together. So here's what to do instead. Instead of framing it as a decision-making call, you want to ask questions, and you can use this as business partner, spouse, whatever. You want to ask questions related to the process required for the outcome. So rather than saying like, okay, in order for you to get $10,000 a month or to lose 40 pounds, etc., what needs to happen in order for you to get there? Well, what needs to happen we'll talk about for sure. But what I want to know is who's going to be holding you accountable or who's going to be your number one cheerleader when it comes to that process specifically. And 9 times out of 10, people are going to say their partner. They're going to say their husband, their wife, and if they don't, you can just ask. And so what we're doing here is we're asking them, so in terms of you getting to XYZ outcome, who's going to be there in your corner, cheering you on, high-fiving you, and also rooting you along when things get tough? Because sure, we can offer support, but I want to know who's going to be there when we're not looking. 9 times out of 10, they're going to say their spouse. Be like, that's great. A lot of people say their spouse. And now what we're going to do is we're going to assume that this is part of the process. And so what we encourage them to do is we just say, hey, look, big part of the process, and if you see them being a huge part of their success, we'd love to invite them on the call with you. That way you both get the information. They know exactly what they're holding you accountable to, and you can't cheat with, say things like, oh yeah, well my coach lets me have a Saturday afternoon cookie or whatever. And so by doing this and understanding how involved and encouraging they are in the process, the invitation becomes more natural rather than, all right, well, in order for you to buy something, you're going to have to talk to your spouse. So let's just bring them on the call anyway. It sounds weird. So you can use this with real estate investment coaching. You could use this with health. It doesn't really matter. What you want to be thinking of, though, is how can I incorporate a natural invitation for the spouse, especially if I know that spouse objections are common. How can I incorporate a natural flow to the conversation, a natural invitation that makes people want to bring their spouse rather than want to avoid bringing their spouse. So by saying things like a decision-making call, we increase avoidance. By saying things like accountability, support, cheerleader, we increase adherence. And so that way we will get them both to show up to the call. So little pro tip, if you have, and when you do get them both on the call, so assume that you put in the encouraging words, you got them both on the call, okay, great. Well now, what do? You always want to sell the person who has sold more, even more. Because if I got somebody who's an 8 and I can take them to a 10, they're going to take the 4 and turn them into a 6. But I'm not going to have that same level of influence because that person's just going to become combative with me rather than combative with their partner. And so I want to ensure that the person who is sold, I'm selling the living crap out of them. Another thing that you always want to do is you make sure whoever you're talking to, you're addressing them by name. So rather than saying things like, what about you, brother? Or how about you, queen? You always want to be using the person's name. So tell me, Tom, what do you think? Susie, how do you think about that? Rather than saying brother, homie, whatever, avoid pet names, nicknames, buddy names when communicating to two people at the same time as best as possible. Just use their first name. That's what they were given anyways. Another thing that is super beneficial when you do get both people on the phone is it eliminates the "we gotta talk about it" objection. The handful of times that I was faced with this objection and I had two people on the call and they would say, yeah, we gotta talk about it, without no hesitation whatsoever, I'd just be like, great, I'm gonna turn off my screen, I'm gonna go get a sip of water, I'll be right back. When you guys are ready, take yourself off of mute, I'll be right there. I don't even give them a chance to respond, I literally just and I leave. And what they do is they just go, I guess we got time to talk about it now. So they just start to engage in the conversation. And sometimes they'll conclude. Usually I'll just wait and I'll sit around, they'll take themselves off of mute, and I'll just be like, awesome. So where do you guys want to go from here? And if they're deciding to move forward, great. If it's like, yeah, we got other things to talk about. Well, it's like, okay, now you can understand the true objection. Because one thing that they're not going to do is they're not going to be honest with you while you're sitting there, and they have to navigate their own relationship because they're both trying to get laid later. And so rather than you trying to figure out how to navigate that, just leave. And then when they're ready for you, come back and then handle the objection. All right, step 2. Here's assuming that you didn't get the spouse on the call. So you tried to get them to show up, you blew it. They didn't show up. Now what do? Well, throw your hands up in the air, give up. Just kidding. Here's the thing. You missed step 1, you blew it. You didn't get the spouse on the call. Now you're talking to one person who says they have to talk to their spouse. They go, look, it all sounds really good. I really want to do it. I just got to talk to my wife or husband, whatever. Goldfish, doesn't matter. Somebody that is not there. Okay, cool. So first thing that I'm going to explain is what not to do. Because there's this sales training that goes about, and it talks about how to coach somebody in how to talk to somebody that they've been with for 20 years. And I can guarantee that was written by a single guy. Because if you spend 6 weeks with somebody and you're developing a relationship and you're going steady, 6 weeks, I guarantee when you frame a question to them, you know what they're gonna say most of the time. 2 years, you know what they're gonna say a vast majority of the time. 10 years, you know what they're gonna say 100% of the time. And so if you're married and you just know this, I'm sure all of you are laughing, but it's like if you're talking to a prospect that is married, you can ensure that they know what their husband or wife will say when they present them with this opportunity. With all that being said, the number one thing to avoid is giving them coaching and feedback on how to talk to their spouse. What you really want to do instead is you want to understand what that conversation is going to look like. And so my favorite question that has worked time and time again to overcome the spouse objection, and I'll explain why, is what do you think they're going to say? Because they know what they're going to say. They know. There's nothing. I've been seeing my girlfriend for, 6 months. And it's like, if I go to her and I just say, hey, look, here's what I want to do. What do you think? I know what she's going to say. I just know. And so if you present that to them and just be like, what do you think they're going to say? One of two things is going to happen. One, you're going to get the truth of what the spouse is going to actually say. Or two, you're going to get their interpretation of what the spouse is going to say, which is then an objection that you can overcome. All of this to say, you asking this question is going to give you one of two options. Either it's going to give you an actual objection for the spouse that you can then overcome, or it's going to give you their actual objection that they've hidden under the spouse. And so if you just say, look, what do you think they're going to say? And they just say, well, they're going to care about the price. I just be like, okay, well, how are you going to frame how we came to the price? Or how are you going to frame why the price is like this? Or how are you going to frame it? How are you going to come to that conversation? That's what we're really trying to ask, is how are you going to frame this to them? Because I'm not going to be there with you. So I just want to make sure that you have all the data that you need in order to get the thing that you want communicated in the way that you want it to be communicated. So how can I help you do that? Help me understand what your understanding is, what you're going to say, and then what do you think their response is? Overall, what's the outcome going to be? And if they say something to the effect of yeah, it's going to be pretty positive, they're going to be there, right there supporting me, I'll be like, great, what are we waiting for then? It's like, oh, it's just part of our process. It's how we make decisions. It's totally cool. So let's just say this. You have this conversation with them later tonight. You're feeling exactly how you're feeling right now. You and I hop on the phone tomorrow, same time. There's nothing else that's stopping us from moving forward, getting this thing rocking and rolling. They go, yeah. I'd be like, great. So I'm not gonna like ruin anybody's marriage. I'm just straight up not just gonna be like, yeah, do it without them. Doesn't matter. Because it's like, that just feels squirmy to me. I do, however, want to ensure that I'm not just gonna be wasting my time. So this is where something like a refundable deposit would work, or some form of commitment, something that is going to be completely acceptable by the third party that you don't have communication with, that they're gonna say yes to. And now, depending on the offer and like what your sales manager gives you permission or what you as a business owner deems to be okay, will dictate what that can be. But you just wanna think in terms of like a small commitment that shows that you're not gonna be wasting your time tomorrow and they're committed to the process. All right, so step number 3. So you tried to prevent the spouse objection from coming up by getting the spouse being there, you blew it. Then you tried to overcome the objection and you were gonna end up being the next reason why divorce court has another episode in the making. So you blew that too. Well now we're playing the follow-up game. And so this is all just about setting the right expectations and ensuring the follow-up does happen. So there's 2 key things to remember when it comes to the spouse objection follow-up specifically. You want to increase the likelihood that these 2 things happen. Number 1 is increase the chances that they actually have the conversation. Number 2, you want to make sure that they highlight the points that are most important to them and their spouse. So at the end of the close, you're like, all right, I've asked for the sale 4 times. This person's like literally on the phone with divorce lawyers on the other line. I'm feeling like this needs to go to a follow-up. It's like, okay, so how do we set ourselves up for the most successful follow-up possible? Well, number 1, how you want to close this call is you want to just be like, hey, look, I want to give you the best information that I can in order for you to have the most educated conversation that you can with your spouse. So you said that their main concern is going to be the cost. Cost aside, is there anything else, anything that you think might come up for them? Be like, no, that's about it. Be like, okay. And so in terms of what we do and how this was priced out, is there any concerns that you have that may affect how you present this to him? No, it feels good. I really like it. So it's like, you're great. Get an agreement on that. Then from there, it's like, all right. So that's how you're going to have the conversation. What more can I do for you in order to ensure that you talk to him tonight about this? Be like, no, that's it. I'll be like, all right. So here's what we're going to do next. I got time, this same time tomorrow, I got 15 minutes open on my calendar. That means that you got to talk to him tonight. You have all the information that you need in order to talk to him. And so I'll see you and him tomorrow if he wants to be on there. If not, all good. Totally get it. And if you have that conversation with him, he gives you the thumbs up that this is exactly what you want to do, now is the right time, great. Then we're going to get you rocking and rolling and onboarding. That all sound okay? Cool. So emergency aside, any reason why you wouldn't show up to that time. And it's just another tie down. So then what you're going to do is you're going to send that follow-up. Then you're going to start to begin to type your notes in the CRM. Just be like, hey, so I'm about to email you this information. Have you talked to your husband about like who I am or this call or anything? And she'll be like, kind of, not really. I'll be like, do you want me to CC him on this email so that he has all the information in order to make sure? And they'll be like, well, no, I'll present it to him. I just be like, okay, so just to make sure, like he's not going to be wanting the same information that you have. And so be like, no, whatever. So then you're just going to CC him on the email, if they say yes, obviously. Get the husband's email, and then what that's going to do is it's going to open up a conversation between you, the husband, and the wife. So then that way he has your contact information. And so all I would say from here is just be like, all right, so look, if he has any questions, he can just respond to this email to me directly. I check my emails 3 times a day, just like every other person. And so don't be shy. Like if there's a question that he has that you don't know the answer to, that's the whole reason why I have this email thread. So the whole goal here is that you try to get the husband or the spouse, whatever, you try to get the spouse's email and you try to give them a way to contact you directly. Because you don't want to be this like obscure sales guy. You want to be somebody who it's like they can point a name and a face to. And so the friendlier the email, the more that you're involved in the communication, the higher the chances that they're going to actually show up to the call and follow through with the process. Because it's really easy to ignore some sales guy. Really difficult to blow off John who took the time to write this email. And so you just taking more steps and more action to show that you care by giving the husband a point of contact to you to answer any questions specifically is going to increase the chances that that person shows up to the next call. So that about sums it up. You got 3 steps. You got what to do before, what to do during, and what to do after. Now, I will give you my favorite Hail Mary. Now this is offer dependent. So I've used this a number of times. I've coached a whole bunch of people through it. At one of the companies that I used to work at, it was one line that we used super, super well. So what we would do is at the end of it, we would just be something to the effect of like, hey, look, it looks like your husband's going to want, I keep saying husband. It's just because, I don't know. It looks like you're what? I don't close a lot of dudes. So look, you and your spouse, you're going to want to sit down and you're going to want to review this information together. But the thing is, you're not going to be able to review all the information because you only have the info deck that I'm able to give you. You don't have what you're actually going to be doing. You don't have your customized plan. You don't know who your coach is. You don't have any of the support. You don't really have what the inside looks like. And so just because I believe in you so much, and I know that this is exactly what you want, I don't usually do this. But what I'm willing to do for you is if you come in at a small deposit, I'll book you your onboarding call. I'll give you a sneak peek behind exactly what it's going to look like. I'll draw up your implementation pathway so that when you and your husband evaluate the information, you're doing it from a place of having all the information, not just looking at the desire and the information, but you're looking at the exact step-by-step plan in terms of getting you from where you are to where you want to be. The hours involved, the upside of it, the investment from you, and how he can support you through that. So if I'm willing to open that door to you and give you that invitation, are you willing to do this for yourself? And that Hail Mary, that's the Hail Mary. And so don't just like willy-nilly do that. Like obviously get your sales manager's permission, get the business owner, whatever, and try to craft something like that. It's kind of what I alluded to earlier. Like you want to have some form of deposit or some form of commitment that people can make so that if they do have something to organize or a third party to get involved, they are still moving their sale forward. And that way, they're still getting closer to where they want to be. I've been Steve. Like, comment, subscribe. Tippy. Tippy. Ah, she gone.